Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant are currently feuding over a hospital for injured Gazan children, which Netanyahu actually, to his credit, initially approved, but has now come out against. Now, can you take a wild guess why Netanyahu would initially approve this and then, flip-flop and say, no, I'm actually against the hospital for wounded children? Could it be the far-right members of the government? And we're gonna get to that in just a moment. Now, here's how Gallant has recounted his dealings with Netanyahu. Gallant was the one to actually recommend a hospital in Israel for Gazan children, and Netanyahu signed off on the idea. So after that happened, Gallant's like, excellent, that's great. So he went to the Prime Minister's office and spoke to the National Security Council, wanting to know what are the next steps, how do we make this happen? But Gallant was stonewalled. His office explains, despite the clear directive from the prime minister to enact the defense minister's proposal, a discussion on the topic was canceled and the National Security Council's instruction was not sent. So Gallant made his plans for the hospital public yesterday. And so according to his office, only after the defense minister's directive to establish a field hospital did the NSC remember to respond to his request and adopt his proposal to transfer the complicated patients from Gaza to a third country via Israel. However, today, Netanyahu has basically stated that he is not, in fact, in favor of this hospital. He informed Gallant that he now opposes the establishment of the hospital. I just want to take a quick pause to reiterate, we're having a discussion about a hospital to specifically treat wounded children, okay? That's what we're having a conversation about. Okay, so let me go on. So Netanyahu is, in my opinion, and based on what the reporting indicates, he's trying to appease the far-right members of his coalition and the far-right faction of Israel in general. So let's get to who those people are. The hawkish Tikva Forum, representing some hostages' families, slammed Gallant for planning to establish a hospital for the enemy's children. This is an outrageous decision that boils our blood and abandons our children.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't abandon your children at all.
How does it abandon your children? It's literally a hospital to treat wounds that were caused by aerial bombardments that the IDF is doing.
Look, I don't know that anyone is doing more damage to Israel than Netanyahu and the far right of Israel. Look, I'm pissed also because I have a lot of Jewish friends here and Jewish family as well. You're making Jewish people across the world look terrible. What are you doing? Saying, we shouldn't treat their children. Who cares if they're wounded? Who cares if our bullets already shredded them? And who cares if they're sick and they're about to die? Let their kids die. You know how bad that looks? That looks terrible. Are you insane? You're smearing your own people in your own country. Jesus Christ, man. And you're not David, you're Goliath. And Goliath, after hurting these kids in the first place, now says we should crush them. Just disgusting. You have all the power. That's why they're asking you, hey, can we get these kids out of the place where you have them as prisoners? Can you please let out the wounded hostages you have so that they can get some treatment? Don't you want Israel to look good? Don't you want people to love Israel? Why are you trying to drive hatred towards Israel? It's insanity.
Thanks for watching. Our audience has helped build TYT into the media giant it is today. Together, we can accomplish anything. Support our work and join us at tyt.com/team. Yoav Gallant isn't some dove, okay? So I'm not trying to launder his reputation, but you compare him to Bezalel Smotrich or Ben Gvir, and I mean, that's a whole other ballgame. And so to Gallant's credit, he's made similar points to what you just said, Cenk. Right? It's about doing the decent thing. I mean, these are literally children, but also it's about the perception of the international community toward Israel. And so let's also talk about the extremists within the coalition in the government in Israel. So the story obviously deeply saddening, but ultimately not surprising, especially when you consider how Israeli politicians Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich responded to an IDF operation that actually ended up rescuing 68 Gazan orphans in March. When that happened, here's how Ben-Gvir responded to it. This is not how a country that wants absolute victory runs. There are countless fake, inhumane measures, and the citizens of Israel continue to pay the price. In war, you have to crush the enemy and not be constantly self-righteous. Again, we're talking about kids. We're talking about the IDF actually doing a good thing in rescuing 68 children. And that's how Ben-Gvir responded to it.
Yeah, Ben-Gvir is a deep racist. He's a fascist who doesn't believe in democracy and doesn't believe that anyone that isn't his particular race should have any rights. He thinks they should be wiped out, slaughtered, and driven from Gaza. He's a disgusting person. And the fact that he has any role in the Israeli government is a deep and lasting shame on Israel. And so, look, I want to say something about the occupation, because this is what the occupation is, the cancer that drives all of this. Because I don't just have close friends who are Jewish. I grew up in New Jersey, New York, then I lived in Miami and LA. I know hundreds of Jewish people. Not one of them would say, let's not treat injured children. Not one would say that, right? But in Israel, because of the occupation, it has created a right-wing culture that thinks us versus them. And the Palestinians aren't really humans. We have to take the West Bank. We have to take Gaza. We have to drive them out. Who cares about their stupid children? Let's either kill them or let them die of their wounds. That's the culture that's created when you are the oppressor and you occupy people for 50, 60, 70 years. And you say they're not human, who cares about them anyway? That's why I'm calling Ben-Gvir a fascist. He has more than earned that title. He's a deep embarrassment to Jews across the world and to his own country of Israel. For God's sake, Israel, you're way better than this. Don't let him define you in this way. Drive these bastards out of your government so you could regain the trust and the love of the world.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about an IDF operation that rescued 68 Gazan orphans. You just heard what Ben-Gvir thought about that. Let's go to Bezalel Smotrich, who said, quote, any mercy to the cruel will end up being cruel to the merciful.
Yeah, another fascist.
Disgusting, absolute. We're talking about orphan children, okay? Their parents have been killed. They are orphans, they are children. And it apparently the IDF helping them, rescuing them, terrible idea.
Yeah, look, they have become what they most hated. And so it's super sad to see. And I don't want anybody like getting the wrong impression from this report that, oh my God, golly gee, these guys twisted the arm of Netanyahu. No, Netanyahu is also a fascist. He's the one that has authorized all of this. He's the one that is 100% responsible for all those kids' deaths, for every kid that's going to die going forward because they're not allowing them to get treatment. Netanyahu is a monster. No one has ever made Israel look this bad. No, Hamas has not injured Israel nearly as much as Benjamin Netanyahu has injured Israel. He has driven more hatred towards Israel and the Jews across the world than any human being in my lifetime, for God's sake. Now look, I've done this whole story from the perspective of my Jewish friends and family because they're hurting those folks so much by having these lunatics that are in charge of a government. They're not in charge of the culture, they're in charge of a government. And governments often get greedy and dictatorial and authoritarian and do violence. All governments do, it's not just about Israel. And the more that they have occupation, the more that they do oppression and the worse direction that they go in. But I also want to say something about my Palestinian brothers and sisters. How much can they take for the rest of the world? Look at these Palestinians. And some of these disgusting people in the right wing in Israel say, oh, there's no occupation. They're not occupied. I mean, you want to talk about gaslighting. You want to talk about the worst kind of propaganda. Well, if they're not occupied, why don't you let them out then? Oh, right, because they are occupied and you control their borders and you kill and oppress them all the time. And right now, we're in front of the whole world. You're letting their children die. The Palestinians have suffered enough. For God's sake, let them go already. Let them go. Every day that you continue the occupation, Israel is considered one of the worst states, one of the worst governments in the whole world. Is that what you wanted for Israel? It's outrageous. And I'm sorry that the Palestinians have to suffer through this. And last point I'll make goes to America. we're funding these monstrosities. The minute they say the children, the wounded children are not allowed out and they should just die of their wounds. Not funding, not all funding. Are you kidding me? I'm gonna send $20 billion, $26 billion to this monstrous right-wing government? No way, no way. But our politicians are completely owned by all of the donors. And in this case, it happens to be AIPAC, and they tell them, shut up and give American taxpayer money to Israel. And don't ever question them. If they let the children bleed out, get them more money. And that's what AIPAC does, and they're disgusting. I hope I've been clear enough. And if you're pretending to be pro-life in America, you're not, because you haven't protested this at all. The children are dying right now, but because they're Muslim children, you don't care at all. So never call yourself pro-life. I haven't seen one pro-life leader complain about what's happening in Gaza. Every pro-life leader in America, and I'm saying this loudly at the RNC, are liars. None of them care about children. None of them care about babies. They all do not mind if babies are killed. Pro-life leaders are the biggest liars in America. If it's Muslim children that are being butchered in Gaza, they don't mind at all.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.